So, imagine this scenario, right? You have 6 of the absolute smartest men in the world sitting together in a private dining room.
Okay, I'm picturing it, like intimidatingly smart.
Oh, yeah, completely. We're talking absolute titans of intellect here. You've got geniuses in, chemistry, mathematics, cryptography, patent law, literature.
Right. Heavy hitters.
Exactly. And they are presented with a mystery involving a missing 75-cent plastic four-leaf cloval.
A plastic cloak?
Yeah, a cheap little novelty toy. And these 6 towering intellects are completely paralyzed by it.
That is just so funny to think about.
Right. They argue, they spin these wild theories, they map out incredibly complex conspiracies, and they hit an absolute dead end.
To get totally in the weeds.
Completely. Now imagine an unassuming waiter, a guy in his 60s who's just been quietly pouring their brandy and clearing their plates the whole time.
Thank God they probably aren't even paying attention to.
Exactly. He politely clears his throat, apologizes for interrupting, and then he solves the entire mystery in about 10 seconds flat.
Oh, man. I mean, it is the ultimate intellectual humbling. And the crazy thing is, it happens over and over again in this material.
It does, and that dynamic completely shatters how we usually think about problem solving. Because, well, usually when we talk about puzzles, there's this expectation of mechanical precision,
Like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, exactly like a jigsaw puzzle. You buy a 1,000-piece box, the lid shows you exactly what the final picture's supposed to look like, and you just have to find the edges and fill in the middle.
Right, it's binary. The piece fits or it doesn't fit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we crave that, right? We really want problems to be visible. We want them to have a guaranteed solution if we just apply enough brute force logic.
Oh, absolutely. We think, if I just think harder, if I run the math one more time, the answer will magically appear.
But the reality is, the moment you step into the world of human psychology, the world of hidden motives, massive egos, just everyday anomalies, that neat little jigsaw puzzle suddenly has 100 missing pieces.
And the picture on the box is a total lie.
Yes, you are looking at a landscape that is incredibly murky.
It's totally subjective. And the tools that make someone brilliant in a laboratory or, say, a courtroom, they are often the exact tools that blind them to the obvious reality sitting right in front of their faces.
Which is exactly what we are wading into today. We are going on a mission to explore the anatomy of the perfect puzzle.
I am so ready for this deep dive.
To do that, we are pulling apart this fascinating collection of mysteries from our source material. It's Isaac Asimov's Puzzles of the Black Widowers.
A classic.
Yeah, we are going to investigate how these specific stories really act as a masterclass in critical thinking. We're looking at how to decode human psychology, how to look past our own crippling cognitive biases, and really how to find the hidden logic that is usually hiding right in plain sight.
But, to really grasp the mechanics of these puzzles, you have to understand the laboratory where these experiments and logic actually take place.
The club itself.
Right. The setup of the Black Widowers Club is absolutely essential to why the stories work.
Well, let's lay that groundwork then, because the context here is just fantastic.
It really is.
The Black Widowers is a fictional club in the stories, but it's actually a thinly veiled, fictionalized version of a real-life literary banquet club.
The Trapdoor Spiders.
Yes, the Trapdoor Spiders.
Correct.
This was a real club in New York, and it's been around for over 40 years. Isaac Asimov was actually a core member of it.
Which is amazing, because rather than inventing characters from scratch, he just looked around the table at his real-life friends.
He stole their personality.
He totally did. He took their quirks, their massive egos, their specific fields of expertise, and just dropped them directly into these stories.
Which is what gives the dialogue such an authentic, almost combative texture, right?
Oh, absolutely. You aren't reading stereotypes. You're reading Asimov's affectionately exaggerated portraits of real intellectuals.
Like Emanuel Rubin.
Yes. For instance, you have Emanuel Rubin, who is this loud, incredibly argumentative, relentlessly opinionated writer. And he's based directly on the famous science fiction author Lester Del Rey.
A guy who would probably argue with a stop sign just for the intellectual exercise.
Precisely. And then sitting next to him might be Jeffrey Avalon.
Right, the tall guy.
Yeah, he's tall, deeply pedantic, very austere, and he works as a patent attorney. And Avalon is based on another giant of science fiction and fantasy, L. Sprague de Camp.
Asimov captured everything, from their physical tics to the exact way they would construct a logical argument.
He really did.
So the format of this club is essentially a monthly ritual. These 6 highly educated, boisterous men rent a private room at a restaurant. They host this lavish banquet, and they bring in exactly one guest.
Just one.
Yeah, and after they've fed him this spectacular meal and the brandy is poured, they aggressively grill him.
It's an interrogation.
It really is. And the opening question of this interrogation is always the exact same. It is so beautifully hostile. They look the guest right in the eye and ask, "How do you justify your existence?"
I mean, it's the ultimate provocation for a group of formidable minds. It instantly strips away the polite dinner party small talk.
It forces the guest to defend their entire life's work.
Exactly. And inevitably, under the pressure of this grilling, the guest reveals some seemingly unsolvable mystery. A puzzle or a bizarre anomaly from their own life.
And here is where the dynamic gets brilliant. These 6 guys are geniuses. You've got chemists, mathematicians, cipher experts. They hear a puzzle and they attack it like a pack of wolves on a bone.
They bring all their academic weight to bear.
And they fail every single time. They fail spectacularly.
They completely overcomplicate it.
Yeah, they get entirely lost in the weeds of their own massive intellects.
Because they fall victim to a specific kind of cognitive trap. It's the belief that a complex mind is required to solve a complex problem.
Which brings us to the actual hero of the source material.
Henry.
The waiter.
Exactly. Henry is the club's unassuming 60-something waiter. He is a very clear nod to P.G. Wheathouse's famous valet character, Jeeves.
Oh, totally.
While the 6 geniuses are screaming at each other, quoting Shakespeare and spitting these wild Byzantine theories, Henry is just quietly standing by the sideboard.
Just doing his job.
Right. He's ensuring the water glasses are full, he's serving the roast, and he is listening.
And when the geniuses have totally exhausted themselves, like they are completely stumped, Henry politely clears his throat, apologizes for interrupting, and solves the puzzle using pure, unadulterated common sense.
It's so satisfying.
It is. And that dynamic is the entire thesis of our deep dive today. This isn't just an appreciation of some clever fiction.
No, the goal here is practical.
Exactly. By adopting what we can call Henry's perspective, learning how to stand outside the noise to observe the obvious, you can really train your brain to solve complex problems in reality.
Because Henry's superpower isn't a higher IQ than the men at the table. His superpower is his absolute lack of ego and his immunity to cognitive bias.
He doesn't have a specific academic discipline he's trying to force the problem into.
Right. So, let's put that to the test. Let's start by looking at the most fundamental tool of communication we have.
Language.
Yes, language. We're going to look at linguistic labyrinths. How do words actually function in a mystery?
Because a word's history or even its syllable structure can be the ultimate clue. But only if you stop looking at the dictionary definition and start looking at the human being using the word.
Exactly. Language is inherently tricky. It's a human invention, which means it is flawed, it's messy, and it's loaded with personal baggage.
The Black Widowers constantly trip up because they treat language like mathematics.
And Asimov illustrates this beautifully in our first case study. It's called The Fourth Homonym.
Oh, this one is great. The setup here feels like something out of a classic noir film. We are introduced to a dying, self-educated business tycoon named Alfred Hunzinger.
A real powerhouse of a guy.
Yeah, this guy built a massive corporate empire out of absolutely nothing. He has 3 sons, and in his will, he is leaving the entire empire to them in equal 1/3 shares.
Now, anyone who knows anything about business knows that an equal 3-way split with no designated leader is a recipe for absolute corporate paralysis.
If not outright war.
I guess.
Which is exactly what his lawyer, a man named Nicholas Brandt, tells him. Brandt basically begs the old man to name one son as the ultimate leader, just to break the inevitable ties.
But Hunzinger completely refuses.
Oh.
He has this massive ego about how he raised his boys.
He really does. He insists he raised them with the noble ideals of the old Roman Republic.
Right. He genuinely believes they will perfectly share power like Roman consuls.
It's a staggering level of delusion, honestly, born of wealth and power.
Truly.
So Hunzinger throws himself an 80th birthday party, and during the party, he has a sudden, massive heart attack.
It's clear he's not going to make it.
Yeah. And Brandt, the lawyer, he sees the empire flashing before his eyes. He leans over the dying tycoon and desperately asks him one final time which son should head the firm.
And Hunzinger's eyelids flutter. He summons his last bit of strength, his lips move, and he manages to mutter a single syllable before he
A
dies.
single syllable.
Right. And the lawyer hears the syllable distinctly. It sounds like two. Tio.
And that single syllable just haunts the lawyer for decades. He eventually brings this puzzle to the Black Widower's banquet. What did that dying breath mean?
And the widowers instantly jump into the linguistic trap. They start debating homonyms.
Words that sound identical but have different meanings and spellings.
They approach it like an SAT question. They're like, was it TO, the preposition? Was it TOO, meaning also? Or was it TWO, the number 2?
They go wild with the theories. They assume it must be the number 2, TWO, and they ask, okay, so why 2? Well, the middle son is named Mark. Maybe Hunsinger meant his number 2 son.
Or, one of the widowers points out, Mark is the second gospel in the New Testament. Maybe that's the connection.
It gets so complicated. Another widower argues it was TOO, meaning also, as in, my daughter too should get a share.
Notice what the experts are doing here, though. They are using their vast, esoteric knowledge of biblical structure and grammar to build these highly complex, incredibly fragile theories.
They are analyzing the word in a vacuum, entirely divorced from the man who actually spoke it.
But Henry, from the sideboard, takes a completely different angle. He doesn't look at the homonym at all. He looks at the tycoon's psychology.
Henry asks a very basic, grounding question. He asks, what is the oldest son's actual first name?
And the lawyer replies that the oldest son has always gone by the initials and name B. Franklin Hunsinger.
So everyone at the table naturally assumes the B stands for Benjamin. Benjamin Franklin Hunsinger. It's a perfectly normal American name.
But Henry connects the dots of Hunsinger's specific idiosyncrasies. Remember, Hunsinger was entirely self-educated, and he was completely obsessed with Roman history.
Right, he forced his sons to learn Latin. He used terms like paterfamilias.
He named his second son Mark, which is the anglicized version of Marcus. He named his third son Luke, from Lucius.
So Henry deduces that an egotistical, Roman-obsessed tycoon wouldn't name his firstborn son Benjamin.
No, the B has to stand for a Roman name, specifically one that doesn't easily translate into a modern English equivalent.
Brutus.
Exactly. Brutus Franklin Hunsinger.
Which completely flips the puzzle. If the oldest son's name is Brutus, then the dying tycoon wasn't speaking an English homonym at all.
He wasn't saying T-O or T-W-O.
He was speaking his beloved Latin. In his final dramatic moment, he was quoting Julius Caesar's famous last words when Caesar was assassinated. Et tu, Brute, and you, Brutus.
But only the syllable 2-T-U was loud enough for the lawyer to hear.
Meaning, and you, Brutus, will lead. The lawyer checks a copy of Who's Who, and boom, there it is. The oldest son's legal first name is Brutus.
It's a fourth homonym. T-O, T-O-O, T-W-O, and T-U.
I have to say, when I read this, it felt exactly like doing a cryptic crossword puzzle.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. In a cryptic crossword, the definition is almost never the literal meaning. It's a pun or a hidden word or an anagram. You can't just read the surface.
That is a perfect analogy. If you approach a cryptic crossword with a literal, rigid mindset, you will literally stare at a blank grid forever.
You'll get nowhere.
You have to understand the specific, slightly twisted rules of the game the setter is playing. You have to get inside the setter's mind.
But let me push back on this a little bit, because there's something that bugs me about this premise.
Okay, what's that?
Well, in a crossword puzzle, the stakes are 0. But here, we're talking about a massive corporate inheritance. Is it actually realistic that a businessman would base the future of his empire on an obscure Latin pun?
It seems reckless, right?
Yeah. I mean, real people do not talk in cryptic clues on their deathbeds. If he wanted Brutus to lead, why not just gasp, Brutus?
It's a valid skepticism, for sure. But you have to look closely at the psychological profile Asimov is building here. Hunsinger is a highly idiosyncratic, self-educated man.
True.
And often, self-made men of massive wealth develop a kind of God complex. They view their wealth and their intellect as a game that only they fully understand.
So he was kind of showing off, even at the end.
Yes. He was fiercely proud of his self-acquired Roman knowledge. It was his intellectual armor against people who had formal educations.
Ah, that makes sense.
So in his final fading moments, his brain didn't default to practical corporate governance. It defaulted to the grand, dramatic Roman gesture.
To him, the clue wasn't obscure at all. It was the absolute core of his identity.
Exactly. He was playing to his own internal audience.
Wow. Okay, and we see that exact same psychological dynamic in the second case study in this linguistic section, a story called Triple Devil.
Yes. Another great one.
This one involves another self-made man. We have a bookstore owner named Benjamin Manfred. He comes to the banquet and tells the story of how, back when he was a poor paper boy, he was mentored by a wealthy, eccentric older man named Lineweaver.
Lineweaver was a serious bibliophile. He had a massive, incredibly valuable library of 10,000 books.
And when Lineweaver dies, his will is highly unusual. He bequeaths Manfred exactly one book.
Manfred is allowed to walk into this massive library and pick a single volume.
One book out of 10,000. And the stakes are really high because Manfred knows that Lineweaver used to brag about hiding one incredibly valuable, rare book somewhere on those shelves.
The old man never told him the title.
Of course not. The only hint Manfred ever received was hearing the old man chuckle to himself and mutter the phrase, "Triple devil."
So Manfred presents this phrase to the Black Widowers, and, predictably, the intellectuals take the bait.
They go right for the complex answer.
They assume triple devil has to be a high-level literary or mythological reference. They start pulling from their deep wells of classical knowledge.
They argue about Pan, right? The Greek nature god with horns and hooves who became the template for the Christian devil.
Right, and then they debate whether it's a reference to Hecate, the triple-faced goddess of witchcraft. They dive headfirst into comparative mythology.
They are looking for the hardest possible answer just to prove how smart they are. Meanwhile, Henry solves it instantly.
Naturally.
He points out a basic historical fact about how normal people actually use language. He notes that historically people were incredibly superstitious about saying the actual word devil.
Because they believed that speaking the name might actually summon him?
Right. The linguistic term for this is a Noah word, a word that is taboo, forcing the culture to invent euphemisms so they can talk around the concept safely.
Exactly. So people invented harmless-sounding nicknames. And Henry points out that one of the most common 19th century English euphemisms for the devil is the Dickens.
As in the phrase, "What the Dickens is going on?"
Furthermore, he points out another incredibly common folk nickname for the devil, Old Nick.
So Henry just does basic linguistic math. Charles Dickens plus Nicholas Nickleby equals triple devil.
It's so brilliant.
Dickens is a devil, Nick is a devil, Nickleby is a devil, three devils. The Hidden Book was a rare first edition of Charles Dickens's Nicholas Nickleby.
And Manfred confirms that this is exactly how he solved it 55 years ago.
What is so crucial here is how Henry solves it compared to the widowers. The widowers go straight to the dictionary and the encyclopedia.
But Henry goes to sociology. He understands the mechanics of why euphemisms exist in the first place. The human fear of naming a bad thing.
He uses the cultural, everyday history of words to decode the riddle, rather than academic mythology.
It really reinforces your point about the egos of self-made men. Lineweaver was sitting in his library, patting himself on the back, calling himself a triple devil for hiding his treasure so cleverly.
He turned his legacy into a literal word game. If you walked in trying to apply Greek mythology, you walked out with a worthless book.
The three-line here is that words are never just words. They are vessels. They carry the baggage, the ego, and the cultural background of the person speaking them.
If you want to solve a communication puzzle, whether it's a deathbed clue or honestly an ambiguous email from your boss, you can't just parse the grammar.
No, you have to parse the speaker. You have to understand their personal dictionary.
Which is the absolute perfect pivot into the next phase of our investigation. We're moving from the text to the subtext.
Yes.
You cannot solve a problem if you don't understand the psychology of the person who created it.
This is perhaps the most practical lesson in the entire deep dive. We have a very bad habit of assuming problems are objective.
We really do. We treat a challenge at work or conflict in a relationship as if it were a math equation waiting to be balanced.
But most problems we face are designed by human beings. And human beings are not objective. Therefore, the problems they create are subjective traps.
I love that phrase, subjective traps. And the next case study is my absolute favorite example of this. It's a story called Unique is Where You Find It.
Such a good title.
The setup is brilliant. We meet a young chemistry student named Horace. Horace is a theoretician. He's brilliant with data, but he's arrogant, he's clumsy in the physical lab, and he has a terrible habit of correcting his professors.
Which paints a massive target on his back, especially because he is dealing with a specific professor named Younger Lee.
Oh, Younger Lee. He is the quintessential academic bully. We've all had a teacher or a boss like this.
Oh, absolutely. Younger Lee's notoriously strict, but his strictness has a very specific flavor. He detests jargon. He demands absolute brutal conciseness in language.
And he uses his institutional power to humiliate students who don't conform flawlessly to his idiosyncratic standards.
So Horace has to face Professor Youngerlee for his oral exams. And Youngerlee knows Horace is terrified of failing. and he knows Horace is a data-obsessed theoretician.
So Youngerly gives him what seems like an impossible riddle. He says to Horace, I'm thinking of the name of a unique chemical element. You tell me what the element is, why it is unique, and why I should think of it. If you can do that, I'll admit you're a good chemist and pass you. You have 1 week.
Now, from a psychological warfare standpoint, this is a masterpiece by the professor. He knows exactly how Horace's brain works. He knows Horace will immediately run to the data.
And that's exactly what Horace does. He brings a literal periodic table to the Black Widower's banquet. He lays it out, and the entire room of geniuses gets completely bogged down in the raw science.
They go crazy trying to find the one unique element. Horace points out that hydrogen is unique because it's the only element with no neutrons.
But then someone points out helium is unique because it was discovered in the spectrum of the sun before it was ever found on Earth.
Right. Then they argue carbon is unique because it's the singular basis of all known life.
But wait, mercury is unique because it's the only metal that is liquid at room temperature. What about osmium? It's the densest element. Francium is the most unstable.
And as I go through this, Horace is struck by a terrifying realization. The data is completely useless.
Every single element on the periodic table has a unique chemical property. If you drill down hard enough into atomic weights, isotopes, and melting points, you can find a unique data point for anything.
The data isn't the solution. The data is the trap. The professor purposely gave him a problem with 100 correct objective answers, knowing Horace would paralyze himself trying to find the most objective one.
So enter Henry. While everyone is arguing about atomic structures, Henry quietly shifts the entire paradigm.
He essentially says, stop looking at the chemistry, look at the chemist. What do we actually know about Professor Youngerly as a human being?
And Horace had casually dropped a crucial piece of background information earlier in the dinner. He complained that Youngerly once spent 20 minutes berating a British transfer student.
Yes.
The student pronounced aluminum chloride as aluminum, the British way, with 5 syllables. Youngerly went on a tirade because the American pronunciation aluminum only has 4 syllables.
He passionately hated the unnecessary extra syllable. He despised long, unwieldy, inefficient words.
Right. Youngerly's core defining trait is his obsession with concise language and his hatred of extra syllables.
Now, Henry completely abandons the chemistry textbook and goes to the dictionary. He looks at the periodic table not as a chart of atomic weights, but as a list of words.
He searches for the one name that is most likely to infuriate this specific, language-obsessed professor.
And he finds it. Element number 59, praseodymium.
It is the only element on the entire periodic table with 6 syllables.
Praseodymium.
It is uniquely designed to drive Professor Youngerly absolutely crazy. The answer to the chemistry riddle had absolutely nothing to do with protons, neutrons, or chemical reactivity.
It had everything to do with the professor's bizarre linguistic pet peeve. The widowers failed because they approached a psychological problem as if it were a scientific one.
Henry succeeded because he understood that when a human being designs a test, the answer is usually a reflection of the human being, not the subject matter.
This resonates so deeply with anyone who has ever navigated corporate politics. Think about prepping for a massive job interview.
Oh, yeah.
You spend 3 weeks studying for the interview by memorizing the company's quarterly reports, learning all their market stats, practicing your technical skills. You walk in armed with objective data.
And then you realize, 5 minutes in, that the interviewer doesn't care about your data at all.
Exactly. The entire interview is actually a test to see if you will validate their specific management philosophy or stroke their ego or fit into their very narrow cultural worldview.
You can have the most accurate data in the world, but if you do not map the psychological terrain of the person sitting across from you, your data is useless.
It really is.
But let me stop you there, because while I love the twist in this story, the underlying message actually frustrates me a little bit.
How so?
Isn't Henry essentially proving that human bias always trumps objective reality? That it doesn't matter how brilliant Horace is at actual chemistry, all that matters is that he can play dirty office politics and figure out his boss's neuroses. It feels a bit cynical.
I completely understand why it feels cynical, but I think Asimov is pointing to something much more profound. The title of the story is The Key. Unique is where you find it.
Okay.
The universe itself does not care about uniqueness. Uniqueness is not a physical property. It is a subjective human categorization. A rock doesn't know it's unique. Only a human cares.
That's true.
The professor wasn't testing Horace's ability to memorize facts. Horace already proved he could do that. The professor was testing Horace's emotional intelligence. He was testing his logic. Could this arrogant, data-blinded theoretician stop looking at the world exclusively through his own narrow lens and figure out how to see the world through someone else's lens?
Oh, wow. Okay, that entirely changes it. It's not about office politics. It's about empathy, cognitive empathy. Can you step outside your own brain?
Precisely. The data trap is real. We often retreat to data because it feels safe and indisputable. But human interaction isn't governed by data. It's governed by psychology.
That makes perfect sense. So we've seen how words blind us and how our own obsession with data blinds us. Now things get really interesting.
We are transitioning to the real world.
Yes, we're going to transition from the relatively safe, structured halls of academia to the chaotic, unpredictable streets of the real world. We're going to look at what happens when a puzzle involves human actions that seem, on the surface, completely illogical.
This requires a massive shift in how we observe the world. Because when someone does something that defies our basic assumptions, like stealing something completely worthless, our brains tend to short-circuit. Our logic engines break down.
Right, and our first case study here is a perfect example. It's a story called The Lucky Piece.
Oh, I love the setting for this one.
The setting is great. It's a quiet, upscale summer resort. A man named Winters is relaxing in the living room with his wife and his 12-year-old son, Maurice. The room is full of other vacationers. Suddenly, the boy leans over and whispers something to his father.
And the father just goes dead white.
He jumps up and initiates this frantic, intense, tearing apart the cushion search of the entire living room.
And what are they desperately searching for? A cheap plastic four-leaf clover? A novelty lucky piece that you could buy out of a gumball machine for 75 cents.
But the father is in an absolute panic. He insists the trinket belongs to his son, but he is acting as if someone just stole the Hope Diamond.
He gets so aggressive that he actually forces all the men in the room to go into the library and strip down to their underwear to prove they haven't pocketed it.
It's an incredible overreaction to a piece of plastic. Now, in that same living room, watching all this happen, is a woman that everyone behind her back calls the Tongue.
Mrs. Freed.
Yes, Mrs. Freed. And she is a relentless, unceasing chatterbox. She knits, and she talks, and she never, ever stops talking. At one point, she drops her ball of yarn, and the boy, Maurice, politely picks it up for her.
She also has a very specific prop. A massive, overly complex purse she bought in New Orleans.
Yes. This purse is a marvel of over-engineering. It has 7 different zippers, revealing 7 separate compartments lined with a slick material.
So when the father's suspicion inevitably turns to her, she is perfectly happy to clear her name.
She makes a massive theatrical show of it. She counts the zippers out loud for everyone to hear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
She turns the massive purse completely upside down and shakes it, dumping everything out onto the table.
There's makeup, there are tissues, there are mints, but there is absolutely no plastic lucky piece. The object has seemingly vanished into thin air.
So the Black Widowers hear this setup, and their logic engines start spinning. They try to find a logical motive for the theft based on conventional value.
They hypothesize that maybe the lucky piece wasn't plastic. Maybe it was actually painted solid gold.
Or they theorize that maybe the 12-year-old boy lost it earlier in the day and was simply too terrified of his father to admit it, so he lied about losing it in the living room.
They are trying to force the illogical event into a logical box, but Henry, who understands that people rarely act without a motive, looks past the obvious panic of the father and the obvious innocence of the empty purse.
He looks at the behavior of the most annoying person in the room. The tongue.
Henry realizes that the lucky piece wasn't a toy. It was a housing for a microfilmed espionage device.
The father was a spy. He gave the device to his son to hold in his pocket, operating on the entirely logical assumption that nobody suspects a child.
But the tongue was an enemy agent, and she used her endless, irritating gossip as the perfect cognitive camouflage.
Nobody takes a noisy, annoying gossip seriously. Your brain dismisses her as a nuisance, not a threat.
She deliberately dropped her ball of yarn to draw the boy close to her chair, and while she was babbling at him, she pickpocketed the device.
But the truly brilliant part of her plan, and the core of the puzzle, is the purse.
The zipper trick. This blew my mind. Okay, if you were standing in that living room watching her empty the purse, your brain would naturally assume she was opening everything.
But Henry points out the mechanics of what she actually did. Earlier in the evening, when she was showing off the purse, she left the specific compartment holding the stolen item open. The zipper was unzipped.
So when she was accused later and made a big show of opening the purse, she dramatically grabbed the tabs and pulled them. but she was pulling the zippers on the 6 closed compartments to open them.
When she grabbed the 7th zipper, the one for the compartment holding the stolen Lucky's piece, pulling the tab, actually closed
And
it.
she zipped it shut right in front of their eyes. Then she dumped the 6 innocent compartments out on the table, proving she was clean, while the stolen device remained securely zipped inside the 7th compartment.
It is a flawless textbook execution of misdirection.
It is exactly how a magician performs sleight of hand. The magician makes a huge, noisy gesture with his right hand, a flash of fire, a loud clap, so that your brain is biologically forced to look away from what his left hand is quietly doing.
In this living room, the distraction was a noisy 7-zipper purse and an unceasing barrage of chatter. It was explicitly designed to make the observers look at the performance and ignore the mechanics.
And we see an even more extreme and, frankly, darker version of this misdirection in the second case study in this section, the old purse.
Yes, this one is wild.
We have a woman on a crowded escalator at Grand Central Station in New York. She is carrying a ratty, old, completely worthless purse.
She specifically carries this ugly piece of junk when she travels because she assumes no self-respecting thief would ever bother stealing such a garbage bag.
But suddenly, someone neatly slices the strap with a razor and snatches it right there in the crowd.
Now, a stolen purse in New York City is hardly a mystery, but the mystifying part happens a few days later. A meticulously wrapped package arrives at her apartment.
It contains all her cash, every single one of her credit cards, her keys, her photos. Every valuable item that was in the purse is returned. The only thing the thief kept was the worthless, scuffed old purse itself.
The widowers are entirely stumped by this. Why would a criminal risk a felony charge to keep a piece of garbage and politely return the untraceable cash?
They spin wild theories. Maybe it was a blackmailer who planted a bug in the purse. Maybe it was a thief with a sudden, overwhelming, guilty conscience who only wanted the purse because they mistakenly thought it was a rare antique.
Now, before we get to Henry's solution, we need to pause here and provide a very important piece of context regarding the source material.
Yes, absolutely. We need to be very clear here.
This specific story features a long philosophical debate between the characters about the nature of terrorism and political violence. The guest who brings the story is a provocative columnist, and he argues that people we universally label as terrorists do not view themselves as criminals.
He argues they view themselves as freedom fighters or soldiers who simply lack a state-sponsored military, forcing them to fight with unconventional, asymmetric means.
And we just have to state clearly here that we're not taking sides, debating the morality, or endorsing that controversial viewpoint.
Right. We are strictly and impartially reporting the philosophical debate exactly as Asimov wrote it in the text. We have to explain it because that specific philosophy is the absolute cornerstone of the puzzle. Without understanding that mindset, the puzzle is unsolvable.
Exactly. Because Henry is the only one who actively listens to that philosophical debate and applies it to the illogical theft of the purse. Henry asks the core question: why would someone need an old, worthless purse? What utility does it have?
His answer? Camouflage.
Yes. Henry deduces that the thief wasn't a pickpocket after money. The thief was an operative who needed a highly specific prop.
If someone intends to plant an explosive device in a crowded place like Grand Central Station, their primary goal is to blend in. They need to look like someone society naturally ignores.
The perfect disguise is a bag lady, a derelict, someone people actively avert their eyes from.
But if a homeless person walked into a station carrying a brand new, expensive leather handbag, it would instantly draw suspicion. It breaks the visual pattern.
The disguise absolutely requires an authentic, scuffed, ratty old purse to hold the explosive device.
So they stole the purse specifically to use as a weapon housing. The worthless object was actually the prize. But the part that really blew my mind was Henry's explanation for why they returned the contents.
Henry says they returned the money and the credit cards out of a twisted sense of patriot's conscience.
Right. Remember the philosophical debate. In their own minds, they are noble soldiers fighting a war. They are not petty thieves who steal credit cards from civilians.
Returning the money was a psychological flex. It was a way to prove their own work nobility to themselves.
It is terrifying, but it is perfectly, chillingly logical once you understand the twist and premise of the adversary. But this brings up a huge practical question for me. Well, in both of these stories, the purse with the zippers and the return credit cards, the distraction is so loud, the sleight of hand is so effective. How do we actually train ourselves to ignore the returned credit cards in our own lives and focus on the missing purse? How do we stop falling for the misdirection?
That is the million-dollar question for critical thinking.
Yeah.
I think the key shift is to stop asking what and start aggressively asking why.
Okay, stop asking what, ask why.
The widowers looked at the facts and asked, what is valuable in the purse? Henry looked at the behavior and asked, why would someone want the purse itself?
Ah.
If an action makes absolutely no sense under your current assumptions, like a thief returning untraceable cash, you cannot just force it to fit. You have to aggressively throw out your assumptions.
You have to ask, under what bizarre set of rules does this action make perfect sense?
Exactly. You have to find the logic hiding inside the illogic. You have to change the premise of the game.
That is profound, which leads us perfectly into our final exploration today. We've seen how language traps us, how our egos trap us, and how misdirection traps us. But in this final case, we see how our own deeply ingrained geographic and cultural assumptions create massive, almost impenetrable cognitive blind spots.
This story is called Sunset on the Water, and it is a brilliant breakdown of how our brains betray us through heuristics.
We have a historian named Chester Dunhill. Dunhill is desperate. He is an obsessive collector, and he is ready to commit a crime to get his hands on a massive, out-of-print, 27-volume set of books called The Historian's History of the World.
He has placed advertisements in journals all over the country. Finally, he receives a handwritten letter from a willing seller. A man named Ludovic Broadbottom writes to say he has a pristine set of the books and will sell it for a very reasonable price.
Dunhill is ecstatic. He opens the letter while walking down the street, reads the good news, and in his sheer excitement, he carelessly tosses the envelope into a passing garbage truck. And only hours later does he realize the terrible, catastrophic truth. The handwritten letter itself contains no return address. The address was only written on the envelope that is now buried in a city landfill.
It's an absolute nightmare scenario for a collector. But reading through the letter, Dunhill finds a few conversational clues about where this Ludovic Broadbottom might live.
Broadbottom writes that he is selling his library because he is moving. He says he can no longer handle the harsh winters.
He mentions he is sad to leave his sizable city.
And he writes, quite poetically, that he will deeply miss his apartment on the shore where, on clear evenings, he sits and watches the sun set into the endless stretch of water.
So Dunhill brings this desperate geographical puzzle to the Black Widowers. The parameters are set. A sizable city, harsh winters, a shore, and watching a sunset into the water.
The widowers instantly jump on the geography. They look at the sunset. The sun sets in the west. Therefore, if you are watching a sunset over an endless stretch of water, you must be standing on the west coast of the United States.
You must be in California, Oregon, or Washington.
But Dunhill, the historian, immediately shoots that down. He points out the second clue. The west coast does not have harsh winters. Not the kind of brutal, snowed-in, bone-chilling winters that force an old man to abandon his home and sell his library.
So the widowers immediately flip to the other side of the map. They look at the East Coast. The East Coast definitely has terrible, harsh winters. New England, New York, Massachusetts.
But then they hit a massive geographical wall. The East Coast faces east. You watch the sun rise over the Atlantic Ocean. You cannot sit on an East Coast beach and watch the sun set into the ocean.
So the geniuses are completely trapped by their own logic. Start desperately combing through atlases, looking for weird geographical anomalies.
They ask, are there any sizable cities on the East Coast that are situated on oddly shaped western-facing inlets or bays? They scour the map of the eastern seaboard.
But there is nothing big enough to qualify as a sizable city looking west over an endless stretch of water that also has harsh winters. They hit an absolute dead end.
They are so stumped they even start considering if the old man was lying, or if the entire letter was a cruel prank by a rival historian. But Henry, who is quietly serving the dessert, clears his throat.
He points out that the brilliant widowers are completely trapped by coastal bias. When they hear the words shore and endless water, their brains immediately assume it means the ocean.
Henry points out that America has a fourth coast, the Great Lakes.
Yes, the Great Lakes are incredibly vast. If you stand on the shore of a Great Lake, you cannot see the other side. It looks exactly like an ocean.
It has an endless horizon, it has waves, it has a shore, and Henry mentally scans the map of the Great Lakes, applying the clues. Which sizable city has notoriously harsh, snowy winters and sits on the eastern edge of a massive body of water, meaning it looks west over that water?
Buffalo, New York. It sits on the eastern shore of Lake Erie, looking directly west over an endless stretch of water.
Dunhill calls information in Buffalo, gets the number for Ludovic Broadbottom, and secures his 27-volume history set. I absolutely love this story because it perfectly highlights the brain's autocomplete function.
That's exactly what it is.
When we hear words like shore, waves, or sunset on the water, our brains instantly, subconsciously autofill the word ocean. It is an automatic reflex that completely bypasses critical thinking.
In psychology, this is known as a heuristic, a mental shortcut. And heuristics are essential for daily survival. If you had to consciously analyze every single piece of data you encountered, your brain would fry.
These shortcuts save us immense amounts of time and energy.
But when you are faced with a complex puzzle or unique high-stakes situation, those exact same mental shortcuts become prison walls. The widowers couldn't solve the puzzle because they literally, cognitively, could not imagine a shore that wasn't attached to an ocean.
This raises a massive question about how we operate in our daily lives. How often do we completely fail to solve problems? At work, in our marriages, with our finances, simply because our brain has auto-filled an incorrect premise and we never bothered to check the premise.
I would argue it happens constantly, every single day. Let's say you're in business and you see a competitor drastically lowering their prices. Your brain's heuristic, its autocomplete, tells you they are trying to start a price war to drive you out of business.
So you panic and lower your prices.
But what if they're actually quietly liquidating their inventory because they are pivoting to a completely new product line? By accepting the autofill, you made a catastrophic strategic error.
Or in a relationship. Your partner is quiet during dinner. Your emotional autocomplete says they are angry at me, when in reality they are just physically exhausted from work.
If you accept the brain's first draft, you stop looking for the actual truth.
You have to learn to catch your brain in the act of auto-completing. You have to interrogate your own initial assumptions. Which brings us perfectly to the ultimate takeaway of this entire deep dive. We have spent this time watching the brilliant Black widowers fail over and over and over again.
They possess immense academic firepower. They are literal geniuses, yet they are constantly trapped.
They are trapped in the noise of their own intellects, trapped by their data, and trapped by their biases.
And Henry the waiter succeeds every single time because he serves the food, steps back to the sideboard, and listens. He operates from a place of absolute stillness. He has no ego invested in the solution.
There is a beautiful, very poignant story fragment at the end of our source material called The Quiet Place. It's about a man who goes to a bustling, highly active summer resort.
He's surrounded by constant chatter, the roar of lawnmowers, people playing tennis, endless activity.
And he hates it. He spends his days hiking deep into the woods, desperately seeking a secluded, silent patch of wilderness. He is trying to escape the cacophony. He just wants to find a quiet place to sit and think.
And that physical quest for a quiet patch of woods is the perfect metaphor for what Henry does mentally in that dining room. While the widowers are arguing loudly at the table, drowning in the noise of their own massive egos and rigid assumptions, Henry finds a mental, quiet place.
He consciously steps away from the emotional static of the problem. He strips away the obscure Latin puns, he ignores the pages of chemical data, he looks past the noisy zippers of the misdirection, and he ignores the coastal biases.
He finds the silence beneath the puzzle.
Knowledge and intellect are incredibly powerful tools. But as Asimov demonstrates so clearly, if those tools are wielded without self-awareness, without the ability to step back and brutally question your own underlying assumptions, they will lead you straight into a trap of your own making.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Remember that jigsaw puzzle we talked about at the top of the show?
The one where the pieces fit perfectly and the box tells you exactly what the solution is.
That puzzle does not exist in the real world. Human puzzles are messy, they are subjective, they are full of massive egos and deliberate misdirection.
You cannot just stare at the pieces and force them to fit. You have to understand the flawed human being who cut the pieces in the first place.
You have to stop acting like the Black widowers, trying to force your own brilliant, overly complex theories onto a messy world, and you have to start acting like Henry.
So we leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over. Tomorrow, when you walk into a chaotic, high-stakes meeting at work, or you find yourself instantly arguing over a misunderstanding in a relationship, or you are just feeling overwhelmed reading the chaotic noise of the daily news,
Are you going to stand in the middle of the room, shouting your theories and arguing about the granular details?
or can you find your own mental quiet place, step back to the sideboard like Henry, and look for the brilliant, simple truth that is hiding right there in plain sight?
The answer is almost always right in front of you. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it.
Until next time.